الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله ذي الملك والملكوت ذي العزة والجبروت. الحمد لله حي قيوم لا ينام، عزيز لا يضام، قهار لا يرام. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. يقول الباري سبحانه وتعالى بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. O you who believe, fear Allah as He should be feared, and die not except on the state of Islam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, bestow upon us the gift to die on the state of Islam. Allahumma ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Amma ba'd. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in few hadith defining the path of every Muslim in this life. Now one of this hadith, قال الكيس من دان نفسه وعمل لما بعد الموت. The wise person is the one who من دان نفسه. He work and hold himself and herself accountable, and they work for that which comes after death. والعاجز, the second path is al-ajiz, the incapable, the one who's making himself helpless. قال من أتبع نفسه هواه, who let his own self following their whims. وتمنى على الله الأماني, or تمنى على الله, and then he wishes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or rely all his dreams to be fulfilled by wishes and hopes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is clear from the hadith that there is no practical, true, sincere action with which the person, he will seeking the answer from the dua of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just wishes. The second hadith, قال كل الناس يغدو, everyone is يغدو, parting, or like going forth every morning. قال يغدو فبائع نفسه, he's going to be selling his soul. For everyone in his journey is going to sell their souls. قال فموبقها, or actually فمعتقها, is going to free it, or is going to ruin it. And these are clear paths that the Prophet ﷺ defined. A person who is wise, and the wisdom here to know that your true life and your true purpose of life need to work for what is going to come after death, for that which is going to happen after death. And by doing that, they are calculating, computing, acting, managing their lives and their deeds in a way that goes to rhyme and be in harmony of what is going to come after death. And this is, of course, meaning according to the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, the incapable is al-ajiz, and the Prophet ﷺ called him al-ajiz because from the perspective of the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ, but this person might be a person who thinks that he is the greatest among the people, that he is the smartest, that he is the wisest, but he is, according to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ description, ajizun, incapable. Why? Because he's following his whims. He's following his whims and loving, to do whatever it dictates on him from fulfilling his and her desires and so on. Now, when we're talking about these two paths, there's one very important aspect, is when you're thinking about one's path in life, that the path is defined by one's belief. For example, say, I'm a Muslim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, but the path that I'm following in my life is Islam or something else. Actually, what really at the head of the path, calling me, making me to be really dedicated to this path, to work for this path, is the objective that is called at the head of the path. This objective itself, this purpose itself, is what defines the dreams. So I have a path, and this path is defined by the objective. The path does not come from nowhere. The path is defined by the objective. Therefore, when I have this objective is going to define the dreams. And when it defines the dreams, then motivation is going to be built, the dedication, the drive, and all of it for the sake of achievement of this purpose, which is achieving my dreams. Therefore, the true belief is what defines the dreams, not the belief that I think I'm believing or embracing. And this is very important. For the believer, the ultimate dream is the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a fact. When we say the ultimate purpose of the believer is the pleasure of Allah, therefore the pleasure of Allah is also the dream of the believer. And you see it in many stories of the companions, Radwanullah ta'ala alayhim, in some of the narration, how they will be talking to their inner self, in their inner conversation. Is like talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meeting Him in the day of judgment, saying, Ya Allah, if you tell me, why did you do this? I will say, Ya Allah, I did it in your sake. And you'll say, Ya Allah, you will tell me that sadaqt, you have saying the truth. So subhanAllah, it becomes a dream. And it truly is a dream. If it's a true believer, sincere believer, all what they think about with their purpose is the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then is the true ultimate dream for this believer is the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the very important when you have a path, when you have a purpose, and this purpose, what defines your dreams, is also define the structure of your thinking, and define also kind of your emotion, and then subhanallah is also dictate or kind of arise from it all your effort, all your dedication, all your worries, all your thinking, all your planning is based on this objective and this dream. For the believer who has his and her dream, the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the structure they live in is subhanallah coherent. It has this cohesion, it has this harmony. Why it has this harmony? Because everything, subhanAllah, rhymes together. And the rhyming is between the heart, the soul, the body, the universe, the life, and all of it together. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala qala, وَإِنَّكَ لَتَدْعُ إِلَىٰ صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ, and you are certainly calling to the right path, the path of Allah, to whom belong the heaven and the earth. أَلَا إِلَى اللَّهِ تَسِيرُ الْأُمُورِ, are not everything or all the things are traveling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the believer is traveling with the whole universe to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is celebrating and praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in submission and prostration. In the beginning of the ayah, which is in the end of Surah Ash-Shura, قال وكذلك أوحينا إليك كتابا أوحينا إليك روحا من أمرنا. We have inspired you ruh, it's like a soul from the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ما كنت تدري ما الكتاب, and one of the aspects of the soul to give life. ما كنت تدري ما الكتاب والإيمان, you didn't know before what the meaning of the book and what the meaning of the iman. ولكن جعلناه نورا, but we had to make it to be a light with which Allah guide whom He will to His path. And this light is the light that illuminates the soul, is the light that opens the heart, is the light that becomes your true insight, and is the same light that is all subhanAllah submerging the whole universe. And this coherence and this harmony in the life of the believer is known by to be known through the halawat al-iman, the sweetness of the iman. The Prophet ﷺ, he called it qurratul ayn, the delight of the eye. It is in the Quran called the sakina. So all of this aspect of the structure of the believer who's seeking and dreaming about the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will gain and build this structure, because everything will be rhyming and everything will be complementing each other, and in full cohesion and harmony, the thinking, the emotion, the praise, the dhikr, subhanAllah, the concern, the dreams, everything it finds its blessing, everything it finds its fruit, everything is growing and rising, and everything getting its blessing from whom? From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Allah said about like the shajara, the tree that grows and it takes all its fruit, and this fruit and all coming and provided and nourished by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the believer, the sincere one, that we ask and pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among them and to help us be on their path. However, not everyone that he's or she's journeying into their life, they're going to fulfill this. Why? Because every Muslim, when you ask them what is your purpose, they will tell you the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what is the reality in their claim? How can they define it? This is the invitation for all of us to look within yourself. Because when I say my purpose is the pleasure of Allah, I ask myself, what does motivate me in my life? What is the drive that is motivating my action in my life? And that's the biggest question. Because I might be, subhanallah, truly, sincerely longing for the pleasure of Allah, but what motivates me in my life is what becomes, subhanallah, very common into the society, that we get used to it. That what is named to be success, what is named to be happiness, what is named to be tranquility, what is named to be, all the aspects that make you feel good, that we learn it from the society, and it does not have any relation with Islam. Therefore, there is, subhanallah, this muftaraq, this separation is like a crossroad. What truly defines the truthfulness of your claim, of your intention, that you seek in the pleasure of Allah, is what motivates you, is the drive that motivates you in your life. If this drive that motivates you in your life meets the Ridwan Allah, the pleasure of Allah, then you are sincere and you're truthful. But if it's not, then a person, he's on the path of being incapable, he's on the path of ruining themselves, he's on a path of being hypocrite. Because hypocrite, dear brother and respected sister, it's not only those who lived in the time of the Prophet ﷺ that they internalize the disbelief and they show the belief. And the Prophet ﷺ told us about the signs of the hypocrite. But the most important here is into your journey. Being hypocrite without knowing, being a person who, subhanallah, the drive in their life is to get certain things, but these certain things, nothing have to do with the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, we have one faisal, one separation, one element, one aspect that divides the two paths. This mabda, this principle is when you seek the Ridwan Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Ridwan Allah is built under a structure. It's not something loose and then you do whatever you want and then you find the Ridwan of Allah. No. It's something that it has its structure, that it has its base, and it has its, subhanallah, structure and stages, and then you get to the Ridwan of Allah. The mabda, the principle that being comprehensive to this whole structure is what you seek ultimately into your life. Do you seek dignity, honor, freedom? Or do you seek safety and security and being safe in this life? That's, subhanallah, the principle that divides the two paths. That's the principle that they divide between a believer and a hypocrite, between a wise and incapable, between someone seeking to free themselves and their soul or to ruin it. Because the true believer, when they seek in dignity, they seek in the honor, and the honor is in being upright. For this reason, many of these sayings, and one of the beautiful sayings that has been narrated from Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, saying, Al-karamatu a'zamu al-karama huwa luzum al-istiqama. The greatest of the honoring, the greatest of attaining dignity is to persevere on uprightness. Persevering on uprightness means that you stand against transgression, that you stand against oppression, that you fight the injustice, and you dedicate your life to establish the justice within yourself. Because if you do not establish justice within yourself, become from those who wrong yourself. قال الله ظالم لنفسه ومن أظلم ممن افترى على الله كذب. There is one who's like, subhanallah, more dhulm, more transgression than to make lies against Allah. And the dhulm also is to wrong themselves, and wronging themselves by not following the path of the istiqam, by not following the path of the uprightness. And the path of the uprightness is not only to pray and to fast and to do the hajj, because those who help you and give you that energy to establish what needs to be established. Because if someone do that, but when it comes to life, he's passive, all what he thinks about his safety, his security, he does not care about anybody else, and all what the, subhanallah, that objective in life is to have happiness in this land, is to have happiness in this earth. That's not the way of the believer. That's the path of a hypocrite, that's the path of an incapable, that's the path of one who wants to ruin himself, as in the two paths that the Prophet ﷺ has defined. Therefore, ibtigha'ul karama, when someone live for the dignity, live for the honor, comes to the point. When someone, subhanallah, will you die for your honor of the istiqamah of Islam, or you prefer to live, turning away from the istiqamah, but gaining peace and safety and security and what is so-called tranquility in this life. That is the greatest ruin of a soul to choose such a thing. For this reason, dear brother, respected sister, in our journey, many of us, they might be preferring this safety. They might, subhanAllah, preferring coziness over establishing justice. They love justice. When it comes to the trial, they're not the people who are going to go forward. They're going to be people who are seeking that safety, and this safety becomes the path, right? So again, what we have said, so at the head of the path is going to be safety, security, tranquility. I don't want to have a problem. I don't have to be following, enduring difficulties. All what I want, subhanAllah, is my peace. So saying, subhanAllah, this is is a refuge within yourself, is a refuge with aspect of cowardness, and this type of refuge is going to redefine one's thinking, redefine one's creed, and by redefining this, someone is building a new aqidah with himself, new creed. This creed is going to change their perception. So when they look at whatever it might cause and alter their peace, like many people who've normalized, they look at, subhanAllah, what's happening in Gaza, the people who's fighting, they say, oh, this type of qital and jihad, this is foolishness, this is frivolity. These people are causing for their own people to be destroyed. They're causing all the destruction, they're causing all the killing. These are people who has been, subhanAllah, bugged inside. These are people who forget that the life is for the dignity, for the honor, by having to persevere on the istiqamah. These people who prefer the dunya, these people who prefer the safety and the security over the istiqamah, over the karamah, over the dignity and the honor. That's why normalization becomes type of way of action in their proper aqidah that they had built based on the structure, based on the structure on the path that they're following. And this is very important, dear brother, respected sister, because we live in a society that is very easy to incline to such a thing. Why is very easy? Because we've been instilled, for all of us, for our youth, for our children, that what it becomes common knowing, what is success? Success is to have good business. Success is to have good job. Success is to have good study, to be successful in your study. What is success? When to have great honor into your life. Can someone say someone will die for his people, for his deen, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This person is awkward for the people who are moderate, but is a terrorist for the people who are extreme. For subhanAllah, you see in the ideologies that dominating the mind of the people today, we might be truly inclined to lose that proper way to find that cohesion into the structure that leads us to the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clarified this. So there's element that we share with you from Surah At-Tawbah, just to see how can we really come back and look within ourselves and help ourselves by examine what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in His book. To not be from those who seeking only safety and peace and tranquility and not caring about the honor and the dignity or by establishing justice. If it happens, alhamdulillah. If it does not happen, I want to be safe, I want to be far from it. Even if I normalize myself, it's okay because, they have started it, they should have not, and so on. But this is important because all these events is, as we have said last time, is imposing on us to review ourselves, to review our principle. Because we might think that we are standing strong on our principle, but when we dig a little bit deeper than the surface, we'll find truly our heart is driven by things that is nothing have to do with the iman. Therefore, am I on the path of being helpless and capable, ruining my soul, or truly on the path of being wise, seeking the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His pleasure. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just 4 elements from the Surah of At-Tawbah. The first one, there's 2 things that it comes, against each other. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, all you who believe, what's the matter of you when it has been said for you to march into the sake of Allah, you have been heavily clinging to the earth. So we have marching forth toward Allah against clinging to the earth. And this is, subhanAllah, the clinging to the earth is the aspect of hypocrisy, is aspect of incapability. Marching forth to Allah is that aspect that you are sincere and truthful, that you are seeking the pleasure of Allah. It's not about to be in, subhanAllah, in a battlefield. It's about you. When it calls for Salat al-Fajr, how do you react? When it calls to any Salat, how do you react? When it comes, subhanAllah, to something that pleases Allah, how do you react? And look at yourself. If there is anything of the dunya, you might travel for it hours. Why? Because it makes you feel happy. Therefore, you are clinging heavily to the earth, and you're not marching forth to Allah. This is an aspect. You see it. We are talking about people normalizing and people, happening, and the people against our noble people in Gaza. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help them and give them triumph or victory. And we are talking about things that aspect, because if you are not on the right way, on the right set, on the right course, what is going to happen? We're going to be inscribed on the list of those who are against those people, against those noble people. Will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, have you supported them? Have you helped them? It's going to look at your heart if you really was someone sincere and truthful in seeking the pleasure of Allah. Because if you do so, you find yourself, before even you go to sleep, you make dua for them. Why? Because your heart is still alive. But when someone, subhanAllah, clinging heavily to the earth, it was dominate his drive and her drive in their life, that we are on the path of being incapable. We are on the path of welcoming hypocrisy in our system. The second system aspect, that's why I say I'll go very fast. The second one is our understanding of the calamities, disaster and difficulties. People, subhanAllah, when happen disaster to other, they feel that they made, subhanAllah, all the, let's say, all the preparation, all the cautions, they took all their precaution to not happen to them. Having such a thing, such a thought, dear brother, respected sister, we have this a seed of hypocrisy. This is how the hypocrite used to think. If a disaster strike the believer, they said, Subhanallah, qala tawallaw. They feel like good, they feel rejoicing, and they said, we already have prepared ourselves to not have this disaster being striking us. But the believer, whatever happened to you, whatever happened to your people, whatever happened around you, you know that is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you know as a believer, following His guidance, it is a mercy from Allah. Whatever you are enduring from difficulties in this life is a way of cleansing and purification and a mercy from Allah to you. And this is how you find yourself that you are truthful on the path of the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just to make it concise, the next point is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blaming the hypocrite by being pleased to stay with the helpless one. People to stay with those who stayed behind. Because in the expedition of Tabuk, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called them to march. It was a very difficult expedition. It was very far, travel, and it was difficult climate, environment, conditions, socio-economic, finance, etc. So subhanAllah, those who they were rich, but they stayed behind. They stayed behind, subhanAllah. Look, they're thinking, this is mentality. Is they stayed behind because they think that they're going to save the money that they would have spent in this expedition, which expedition does not have any purpose. They have saved their life. So subhanAllah, رَضُوا بِأَن يَكُونُوا مَعَ الْخَوَالِفِ is not like because they have excuses, but that rida, to be pleased, to stay with those who stayed behind, is an action of hypocrisy. So when the believer is called to march forth, to help, and he make their calculation, their safety, their security, they keep in their saving is better than to do that in the sake of Allah, then know that we have not only seed of hypocrisy, but we have the whole hypocrisy in our heart. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the contrast. The contrast is those fuqara, those who do not have anything, those who are in need, those who are poor, they came to the Prophet ﷺ begging him to take them with him. He said, I do not have any mount. قال تولوا وأعينهم تفيض من الدمع حزنا ألا يجدوا ما ينفقون. They turn away and their eyes are overflowing with tears because they didn't find anything to give in the sake of Allah, to finance, to invest so they can join the Prophet ﷺ. Look the big difference. For this reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, the result that these hypocrites, they accumulated a lot of money. And they have a lot of children. Children means, power, succession, continuity of power, and so on. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَلَا تُعْجِبْكَ أَمْوَالُهُم. 2 times in Surah At-Tawbah. 2 times. فَلَا تُعْجِبْكَ أَمْوَالُهُم وَلَا أَوْلَادُهُم. Do not be surprised, mesmerized, or do not let their wealth and their children to wow you. إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ. Only Allah wants. So when you see, subhanAllah, transgressor, disbeliever, ungrateful, people who normalize, hypocrite, they have money and they have things, don't let this thing wow you. Don't let them mesmerize you, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling you that Allah is using that to torture them, to punish them. إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُعَذِّبَهُم بِهَا فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Allah wants to torture them, to punish them with these things, with the love they have for the thing. All their, subhanAllah, ruin is going to be source, or like their source is from these things. قَالَ لِيُعَذِّبُهُم بِهَا فِي حَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. And then they die in a state of disbelief. Said it 2 times, the same ayah. Said it 2 times, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To help you understand what people, they look for safety and security, which is defined by the accumulation of money, by the accumulation of wealth, and of course it is the definition of the American dream, the house and the car and the family. So that coziness that presented in this beautiful dream is indeed, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for those who not have belief in their heart, is going to be the source of their punishment, as Allah said in the Quran. The last point is, when someone, dear brother, respected sister, get to this point, it will be then easy for them to, subhanAllah, to sell themselves. Easy for them to give up their dignity. Easy for them to give up their honor and to get an alliance of people to hurt the believers. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, for those who build the masjid, to harm the believer, to divide the believer, and to have a nest for the disbeliever, for spying and to be against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why? Because they intended the pleasure of Allah, but the drive in the life, it was not that. It was something that we want for ourselves, something that we want coziness, safety, and we don't care about dignity. We don't care about honor. And we're not talking about the honor when you see the transgression and injustice. It pain you, it sadden you, it make you to want to, subhanAllah, to change. That's why there's a 3 category of people. The first category, Allah gave them the ability to stand and strive and fight. And the second, the people who do not have the ability. Those people, Allah look at their heart. And the third, the people who change and normalize. And those people, wal-iyadu billah, those who ruin their souls, those who are incapable, those who are the hypocrite, those who get the curse of Allah upon them. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على النبي المصطفى أما بعد. It's an invitation for all of us. In our journey of this life, is a struggle of our existence, there's only 2 paths. Are you from those who are freeing their souls, or for those who are going to ruin their souls? And if you want to know that, look at the ultimate purpose. And it's not the ultimate purpose, but drive your ultimate purpose. If you truly and sincerely eat the pleasure of Allah, will you stand for justice? Will you go against transgression? If you will have the opportunity, will you fight for it? And that's, subhanAllah, the true drive. And that is the drive that reflects sincerely the longing to the pleasure of Allah. But if someone, they drive and their preference is to find only safety, to continue accumulate money, to not care, to wish that everything stop so they can continue to engorge and indulge in what they're doing, you are not on the path of Allah at all. And this is a reminder for all of us. For this reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the greatest gift for the believer is at-tawbah. And amazingly, the whole surah is called the Tawbah, from which we shared with you the element and the aspect with which someone can examine their inner soul if they are on the right path of the pleasure of Allah, truthful and sincere or not. And at-tawbah, dear brother, respected sister, is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provide for you, accepted from you, to elevate you. And by elevating you, He will subhanahu wa ta'ala protect you and safeguard you and bless you and set you on the course of the uprightness. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, لَقَدْ تَابَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala turned with His mercy to His Prophet, to the Muhajireen and Ansar. Now there is aspect very important. قَالَ الَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوهُ فِي سَاعَةِ الْعُسْرَةِ. Those who followed Him in the time of hardship. Therefore the tawbah is not to be asked from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in time of ease. But when you go through calamities, when you go through disaster, when you go through time of insecurity, when you go through time of hardship, of time of perversity, that's the time of the cleansing of the soul. That's the time when you're going to doubt. That's the time that you're going to be hardly shaken from inside. That's the time when you check if you truly you are close to Allah. That's the time, it's either you're going to flee to Allah or you're going to flee away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the time of the tawbah. And this is the time for all of us to look within ourselves with all the difficulties that happen around us, especially to our people in Palestine, because your people, this is your brother and your sister. If you don't feel what they feel, then we have a big defect in our structure of the iman. Then when we look at the tawbah and we look at the time of the usra, the time of the usra, of the hardship, consider it to be this time for all of us is a time of cleansing and purification and going back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to re-examine our path to His pleasure and to make it that structure that is coherent. Remember, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave the glad tidings of the conquest of Al-Qustantiniya, Constantinople. قَالَ لَتُفْتَحُنَّ الْقُسْطَنْطِنِيَّةَ. You're going to conquest it. The conquest of a city that it has, subhanAllah, spread in it the way of other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But to have La ilaha illallah and to have to spread justice and to stop oppression in it, the effort started from 50 Hijri, from the time of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, and it was in the time of the Dawla al-Umayyah. It continued with Harun al-Rashid in al-Dawla al-Abbasiyah. And only, subhanAllah, the conquest happened on the hand of Muhammad al-Fatih in 857 Hijri. We are talking about 800 years of generation driven by loving dignity, driven by loving honor, driven by persevering on uprightness, driven by having the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be the highest. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fulfill the glad tidings of His Prophet, certainly He will fulfill the glad tidings of the noble Al-Aqsa to be freed. For do you want to be your name to be inscribed with those who supported and helped, and those who have been hypocrite and incapable? To do so, examine your heart and say to yourself, dying for the sake of honor, dignity, freedom of justice is better into your heart, is stronger into your heart than to live a life of safety but humiliated. And that's the big difference. That's what defines the true, sincere, truthful intention that you have in seeking the pleasure of Allah. And that is the way of Islam. And that is the way of the guidance of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made one of the greatest action in the shahada. And what is the shahada? Is to die in a state of honor and dignity, fighting for justice for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. اللهم ثبتنا على صراطك المستقيم واجعلنا من عبادك المتقين. اللهم لك أسلمنا وبك آمنا وعليك توكلنا وإليك أنبنا وبك خاصمنا. اللهم اغفر لنا ما قدمنا وما أخرنا وما أسررنا وما أعلنا. اللهم يا أرحم الراحمين ويا أكرم الأكرمين ويا رب العالمين. اللهم يا منزل الكتاب ويا هازم الأحزاب اغث إخواننا في غزة. اللهم اغثهم يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم احفظهم بحفظك. اللهم اكلئهم بعزتك. اللهم وانصرهم بنصرك وأيدهم يا رب العالمين. اللهم ارفع غمهم ونفس كربهم. اللهم أطعمهم واسقهم واشف مرضاهم واجعل قتلاهم من الشهداء يا رب العالمين. ودمر الظالمين المعتدين إنك على كل شيء قدير وبالإجابة جدير. نعم المولى ونعم النصير. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. وأقم الصلاة يرحمكم الله.